Marion Parker was born on October 11, 1915, in Los Angeles, California, to parents Perry and Geraldine Parker. Marion had a twin sister named Marjorie and an older brother named Perry Jr. Although Marion and Marjorie looked similar, they were not identical twins. Perry Parker worked at the National Trust and Savings Bank for 20 years, and Geraldine was a stay-at-home mother. That was the life of little Marion before she was kidnapped and butchered. The question is, who could have committed such horrifying act and why? Well, join us as we unravel the details of the 1920 murder case of Marion Parker. Marion was close to her father and often accompanied him to work at the bank. She was described as a nice child and a bit of a tomboy. She preferred spending time with her family, playing trains, and throwing footballs. On December 15, 1927, Marion and Marjorie went to school as usual at Mount Vernon Junior High School. Around noon, a man claiming to be Mr. Cooper, sent by Perry Parker, entered the school and convinced the registrar, Mary Holt, to release Marion, stating that her father had been in a serious accident. The man left with Marion, and no one at the school questioned the situation. Marjorie, expecting Marion to join her on the streetcar ride home, became worried when her sister didn't appear. The family assumed Marion stayed behind at school, but by 4:45 p.m., Perry and Geraldine Parker became concerned. They called the school, learning that Marion had left with Mr. Cooper. Worried, they contacted the police who, during their visit, delivered a telegram signed by Marion and George Fox, stating that Marion was secure, advising against interference with their plans. On the next day, December 16th, more message arrived, this time in the form of a ransom note titled Death. The kidnapper demanded $1,500 in gold certificates for the safe return of Marion. The note warned Perry Parker to use good judgment, stating that he would be the loser if he failed to comply. The instructions were to secure $1,500 in gold certificates in U.S. currency, keep them with himself as he goes about his business as usual, and avoid involving the police. The note emphasized keeping the affair private and making no public notice. Fulfilling these terms, along with the transfer of currency, was said to secure Marion's return. Failure to comply meant no one would ever see the girl again, except the angels in heaven. The kidnapper set a 3-day deadline for him to deliver the money. Subsequent notes, signed Fate, Death, and The Fox, reiterated similar demands. One of the letters included a postscript purportedly written by Marion, urging her father to do as instructed to save her life. Perry received a call from the kidnapper, providing details on where to meet for the money exchange, specifying 10th Street from Mercy Place. Following the instructions, Perry went to the location at the appointed time with the requested money. However, unbeknownst to him, the police who were investigating the case had secretly followed him. Upon realizing this, the kidnapper fled. The next day, more telegrams arrived at Parker's home, criticizing Perry for involving the police and warning that Marion would be killed, marking it as the last day before the tragic outcome. Following this, a letter in Marion's handwriting pleaded with her father to comply with the kidnapper's demands and avoid involving the police. Mr. Parker, feeling extremely anxious, consulted with officers. It was decided that he could meet the kidnapper alone. 2 more telegrams arrived at the Parker house that afternoon. The first urged Mr. Parker to recover his senses, expressing the kidnapper's preference for money over killing Marion. It was signed Fox Fates. The second, signed simply as Fate, warned Mr. Parker to set no traps and emphasized the precariousness of Marion's life. At 7:35 p.m., Mr. Parker received instructions for a second chance to deliver the ransom. The kidnapper instructed him to bring it to West 5th Street and South Manhattan Place. Mr. Parker complied, this time avoiding police involvement. By 8 p.m. that night, he arrived at the location with the ransom in hand. A Chrysler coupe pulled up next to Mr. Parker's car, with the driver's face covered and a firearm pointed at Mr. Parker. Marion was visible in the passenger seat, seemingly unconscious. Mr. Parker handed over the ransom and the kidnapper drove away. However, after a short distance, the kidnapper pushed Marion out onto the curb. Mr. Parker rushed to his daughter, hoping she was just sleeping. As he cradled her, he noticed Marion was pale, and all her limbs were lifeless. The hope for her safe return quickly turned into grief as Mr. Parker realized that his daughter had tragically lost her life. He contacted the authorities, and that night, at 9 p.m., an autopsy was performed on Marion's body. The coroner disclosed that Marion had been dead for about 12 hours, indicating she was likely alive during the first unsuccessful meeting. Tragically, her arms and legs were severed, and she had been disemboweled. Her lower stomach was filled with a towel and a man's shirt, and her eyes were propped open with piano wires to give the appearance of life. Early the next day, on December 18th, during his morning walk, a man discovered the severed limbs and organs of a child, including Marion's, wrapped in newspaper on the street. The news of the horrifying murder of 12-year-old Marion Parker quickly spread not only in Los Angeles, but throughout the entire United States. A $50,000 reward was offered for information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator, and later increased to $100,000. During the investigation, two men, Earl Smith and Lewis Wyatt, were initially apprehended and interviewed, but later released without charges. The school registrar, Mary Holt, who could identify Marion's abductor, informed the authorities that neither man was the one who had come to the school on December 15th. In response, the police launched a nationwide manhunt involving over 20,000 officers and volunteers. A laundry mark on a shirt in which Marion had been wrapped led them to the Bellevue apartments in Los Angeles. During the search, they found a young man with black hair who identified himself as Donald Evans. The police proceeded to search his place, and he didn't object, but the officers found nothing suspicious. As they left, Mr. Evans expressed hope that they would soon catch the criminal. He contacted the authorities, and that night, at 9 p.m., an autopsy was performed on Marion's body. The coroner disclosed that Marion had been dead for about 12 hours, indicating she was likely alive during the first unsuccessful meeting. Tragically, her arms and legs were severed, and she had been disemboweled. Her lower stomach was filled with a towel and a man's shirt, and her eyes were propped open with piano wires to give the appearance of life. Early the next day, on December 18th, during his morning walk, a man discovered the severed limbs and organs of a child, including Marion's, wrapped in newspaper on the street. The news of the horrifying murder of 12-year-old Marion Parker quickly spread not only in Los Angeles, but throughout the entire United States. A $50,000 reward was offered for information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator, and later increased to $100,000. During the investigation, two men, Earl Smith and Lewis Wyatt, were initially apprehended and interviewed, but later released without charges. The school registrar, Mary Holt, who could identify Marion's abductor, informed the authorities that neither man was the one who had come to the school on December 15th. In response, the police launched a nationwide manhunt involving over 20,000 officers and volunteers. A laundry mark on a shirt in which Marion had been wrapped led them to the Bellevue apartments in Los Angeles. During the search, they found a young man with black hair who identified himself as Donald Evans. The police proceeded to search his place, and he didn't object, but the officers found nothing suspicious. As they left, Mr. Evans expressed hope that they would soon catch the criminal. On December 20th, investigators found an abandoned car that was later identified as the one used by the kidnapper. Fingerprints retrieved from the car door matched those of William Edward Hickman, a 19-year-old former co-worker of Mr. Parker. It was discovered that a year before Marion's murder, Mr. Hickman had been arrested based on a complaint filed by Mr. Parker for stealing and forging checks amounting to $400, and he received probation for these crimes. The investigators also obtained fingerprints from the letters sent to Mr. and Mrs. Parker, which matched William Hickman's prints. Suspecting him as the perpetrator of Marion's kidnapping and murder, Detectives went to his apartment for further evidence, but it was too late. The apartment, known as the Bellevue Arms, was already occupied by Donald Evans. Detectives realized that Mr. Donald Evans was, in fact, Mr. William Hickman. This time, they conducted a more thorough search of his apartment and discovered bloody footprints. Inside, they found partially burned handwritten drafts of the ransom letters and newspaper clips related to the kidnapping. The building's janitor reported seeing Mr. Evans, or Mr. Hickman, carrying packages to his car on the night of December 16th, and they also report seeing him wiping down his car seats the next day. Initially, authorities couldn't find William Hickman despite searching in Kansas and El Paso, where his father lived. However, his picture appeared in newspapers nationwide. A breakthrough occurred when a gas station attendant in Oregon reported a possible sighting of the wanted man driving a green Hudson sedan. In Seattle, one of the 20 gold certificates was used to buy cold-weather clothing, prompting police alerts in Washington and Oregon. On December 22, 1927, in Echo, Northeast Oregon, Chief Police Officer Tom Goodane and Traffic Officer Buck Llewellyn spotted a green Hudson car during a cigarette break. They began following it, eventually catching up and forcing the driver, Mr. William Hickman, to pull over. Hickman didn't resist arrest and nonchalantly remarked, "Well, I guess it's all over." William Hickman admitted to participating in the kidnapping of 12-year-old Marion Parker, but implicated two other men, brothers Oliver and Frank Kramer. In a detailed account given to a reporter, Hickman claimed to have collaborated with the Kramers in the kidnapping plot. Although he admitted to selling the telegrams and making phone calls, he insisted that it was the Kramers who were responsible for the girl's murder. However, the Kramers provided a solid alibi, as they were both in prison for several months. Detective Herman Klein from the LAPD accompanied William Hickman on a train from Oregon to California. During the journey, Hickman asked why the people of California wanted him, to which Klein replied that they wanted his life, whether rightly or wrongly. On the train, Hickman wrote a 19-page confession admitting to Marion Parker's murder. He revealed that he committed the crime because he needed money to pay for college tuition. According to his confession, he killed Marion only after she recognized him from a previous encounter when she accompanied her father to work. Hickman admitted to strangling her and dismembering her body to make it easier to hide. Later, he realized that Mr. Parker wouldn't pay ransom for a dead child, so he stuffed towels into her body and sewed her eyes open to give the impression that she was still alive. Hickman's trial ended on February 9, 1928. After deliberating for only 36 minutes, the jury announced that they found the defendant, William Hickman, guilty of first-degree murder. Speaking to the press after the verdict, Hickman admitted his guilt, expressing that he didn't have much to live for and didn't yet understand why he killed Marion Parker, but he accepted his punishment. On Valentine's Day 1928, the judge sentenced Hickman to death. Despite facing execution, Hickman reacted with a laugh. And there you have it, guys. If you want more videos like this, be sure to hit that like button and share this video with your friends. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more amazing content. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.